Good evening. I'm Sean Decatur, president of Kenyon College, and I'd like to welcome you to an evening of conversation, poetry, and prose with the Kenyon Review, featuring our new editor, Nicole Terez Dutton, in conversation with poet Carl Phillips, followed by readings by the Kenyon Review Fellows. I am thrilled tonight to introduce you all to the editor of the Kenyon Review, Nicole Terez Dutton, who began her leadership of the journal and the multifaceted arts organization on July 1st, succeeding David Lynn, who retired in June after 26 years as editor. Nicole is an accomplished and widely admired poet. Her collection of poems, If One of Us Should Fall, won the 2011 Cave Canem Poetry Prize. Her work has appeared in Callaloo, Plowshares, 32 Poems, Indiana Review, and the Salt Hill Journal. She's received fellowships from the Frost Place, the Fine Arts Work Center, Breadloaf Writers Conference, and the Virginia Center of Creative Arts. But wait, there's more. Nicole is also a skilled and accomplished editor, serving as poetry editor at the Baffler, as well as the managing editor of Transition Magazine and the Du Bois Review, both affiliated with the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University. And there's even more. Nicole is a dedicated teacher, having taught in the Solstice Low Residency MFA program of Pine Manor College and in the writing program at Emerson College. Accomplished writer, skilled editor, dedicated teacher, Nicole is a wonderful choice for leading the review forward into the future. And I saved the best for last. Nicole is a native Clevelander, called back to Ohio to bring her talent and vision to the Kenyon Review. I'm honored to work with her. Tonight, Nicole will be in conversation with Kenyon Review trustee and poet Carl Phillips. Carl is the author of 15 books of poetry, most recently Pale Colors in a Tall Field and Wild as the Wind, which won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Other honors include the Aiken-Taylor Award for Modern American Poetry, the Kingsley Tufts Award, a Lambda Literary Award, the Penn USA Award for Poetry, and fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Library of Congress, the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and the American Academy of Poets. He has also written 2 prose books, The Art of Daring, Risk, Restlessness, Imagination, and Coin of the Realm, Essays on the Life and Art of Poetry. And he has translated the Philoctetes of Sophocles. He teaches at Washington University in St. Louis and serves on the Kenyon Review Board of Trustees. Carl and Nicole will converse for about 10 minutes and answer some of your questions online. Please type your questions into the chat function below and our moderators will share them with the interviewers time allows. After their talk, Kenyon alum Gibson Oakley will offer his recipes for a specialty cocktail mocktail for you to mix up before we hear readings by our 2 fellows, Molly McCully Brown and Misha Ray, as well as an award-winning poem by Kenyon student Tariq Thompson. This past year has been a struggle for many of us as we confront the realities of injustice, violence, and inequity on many fronts. And in this climate, poetry and literature are tools not just for coping and surviving, but for building a vision of the world as we'd like to see it and moving us all closer to that vision. And it is in this climate that I'm enormously grateful for the presence of the Kenyon Review. And now, here are Nicole and Carl.
Hi, Carl.
It's
Thank
great
you so much, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. And it's great to be here as part of the celebration. And welcome to the Kenyon Review.
Thank you so much.
I thought we'd, have a little chat briefly. And so I thought I'd just jump in if that's all right. I guess maybe an obvious question, but a new editor sort of inevitably means a new vision for the magazine. And on top of that, you're the first person of color to serve as editor of the Kenyon Review, and I believe only the second woman to serve as editor of the Kenyon Review. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about all of that and what might readers expect to see in terms of any changes or new visions you have for the magazine.
Yeah, absolutely, Carl. Thank you for that question. Thank you for interviewing me, and thank you, President Decatur, also for that introduction. I really appreciate that. In terms of being the first, the second woman and the first person of color, my sense is right now there are plenty of Black folks and plenty of people of color in the literary landscape And it just makes sense. It's just a matter of time before you see that represented in organizations and in leadership positions, and already in publishing that has really started to happen. So it's really nice to be a part of an organization where I can be welcome in, and also we recognize that there is investment in the whole literary community, and making sure that everyone has a place at the table and is invited into the conversation. So I'm delighted, and I'm happy to be a part of the Kenyon Review. It's very exciting for me. And I have to say also, this is a really exciting time to be doing this work, which is a privilege to do, to be able to kind of work with so many people who are so invested in the review, and to work from strength to strength. And when I say that, I mean that we're already starting at a place where, as an organization, and the Kenyon Review is an organization, it's not just the journal, right? So we have an organization that has a long history, that has investment from, a broad community, that has a board of active people who are, incredibly motivated and determined, and to have the review stay relevant and be successful as an organization. And then we also have, we have dedicated staff. We have a huge number of editors, and then we have 97 student associates who work with us as readers. And then we have our writers who are everything, who we want to nurture and be able to promote their work. And then we have also this huge readership of people who are just so, I always say they're loud in my inbox, both with praise and with questions and with expectations. So all of those things are those are great and powerful kinds of engines to propel us forward. And I would say there's a couple of things that I'm really interested in working on. And one of them is just to make sure that everyone does understand that the review is an open space, a welcome space, and I want to say a space where we are listening, and there is an attempt to be nimble and to speak to the current moment. So we're inviting that conversation, even if it's rowdy. We do definitely want to participate in that. And so I think that it's important that we are able to stay nimble that way, stay responsive, and stay open. And so couple of things will help with that. One is just really reinforcing our capacity to do developmental editing and to offer that to our writers, to make sure that we can accept work, not just everything that's ready to go as it comes through the gate, but really help the work evolve. And then the second thing is make sure that our programming is open and available to everyone, and that we can meet people where they are, which, this is a good year for that. So those are things that we'll be focusing on. And then I would say that you can look forward to seeing more visual content in the journal, which I'm very excited about that, engaging that conversation. And then also a more robust version of web presence for KRO.
That's great. I'm excited already. I'm looking forward to all of it. And thank you for that answer. And speaking of editing and writing, you are, as Sean mentioned in the introduction, you are a writer yourself, and you're an editor. And I know you've already then had experience of sort of balancing these two sides of yourself. But I'm just curious, how does that work for you? I don't know that everyone could do that, be a dedicated editor and a dedicated poet and make it all work.
I would say for me, it's really extraordinary to get to read so much because, as a writer, you're informed so much by what you read, and just the volume is something that for me it's both staggering and inspiring. And so you have a very, very keen sense of what is happening in what the conversation is, and you have a sense of what things feel new and vibrant and alive in a different kind of way. So that's a useful thing to be able to, it's a useful kind of skill to be able to develop, just a keenness in the reading. And then I would say for me, I definitely am inspired by the work that I read. I definitely learn a lot from the mistakes that other people have made and the successes that other people make on the page. And that's just a really helpful kind of perspective to have. And I definitely find that I have an idea, I have a head full of ideas when I go to the page. So that's lucky.
That's great. That's great. I'm glad that they sort of feed each other then in that sense. And I guess my last question is, I'm curious, I know that the plan is for the summer program, that this year it's going to be online. And I guess I'm just curious as to how you see that working. How will it be different? And I guess advantages or disadvantages, anything you'd like to say about that?
I see it working beautifully, Carl. I think I'm very excited about the summer programming.
Mhm.
We are going online, and that means that for us, we have the possibility to reach out to people who, in an ordinary summer wouldn't be able to make it to Gambier to be with us. So we have, for the first time, we have a tiered program that offers different people different levels of involvement. So, being online, working from home, with your whole life in your house while you are attempting to build some poems or flesh out a short story is a different way of working and thinking and approaching a workshop. So we're sensitive to that. And so we've developed a plan that will allow people to participate, like I said, on the level that is comfortable and workable, manageable, and fun for them, hopefully inspiring and challenging in the same level of rigor, but it's going to look a very, very different program.
Oh, well, I'm excited about that too. As you know, I'm going to be teaching in it, but don't really know what to expect. But I'm always up for an adventure, and I feel confident with you at the helm. So I look forward to that. And I believe that's the end of our questions. But now Elizabeth Dark. And thank you for answering those questions. Elizabeth Dark from the Kenyon Review will relay some of tonight's questions from the audience. We have time for some Q&A.
Yes, thank you both, Nicole and Carl. What a rich conversation with lots to consider long after this evening's event has concluded. We do have a number of questions from the audience and our time is limited, so I will jump right in. And we will not be able to get to all of them, but we will do our best. First question. This kind of is to both of you. Can you give any advice to newer writers who are struggling to get traction for their writing and they don't have a crit group or an institution or an MFA community to support them? Do they simply keep submitting and hope something changes?
I'm going to say, first of all, I think community is really important in writing. So I would make an effort to try to find community. If that's local or if that's online, there should be a group or there should be a class or there should be some kind of mechanism to help connect with other people and establish that writing group if that's something you're interested in doing. I would encourage that. I would also say writing all of the time is going to be writing as a practice, and developing that and being vigilant about that is going to be a very useful thing for you to do. And then I would also develop a steady reading habit to go alongside that. Carl, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, yes, many of them are, I agree with what you just said. I was just thinking I'm supposed to be writing a book about this very thing, so I should have some thoughts, but yes, I was just thinking, I myself, when I started writing I knew no poets and was a high school teacher, and strangely, everyone wondered why I was always reading books that I didn't have to read. And so I don't know. I understand that question from that different perspective. I guess for me, I'm not as community oriented. For me, I didn't know there was an option of a community. I suppose that's more what it was. And so it did seem to me as if I had to set up a practice for myself of the type you're saying, Nicole. For me, it was Sunday mornings. I was free from grading and all of that. So I would actually make myself practice different forms for 3 hours every Sunday. I didn't know what a sonnet was. I got a book that explained these forms. So I didn't, even if I didn't have anything to write about, I could sort of at least force myself to do that exercise. And it felt like a kind of community because I was working with other poems, other books. But when I did finally stumble upon a workshop, it was very valuable, especially just for confirmation that I wasn't crazy wanting to do this thing. So, but I acknowledge it's hard, depending on where you live and what access you have.
Thank you both. Nicole, do you see more experimental work being published in the Kenyon Review under your tenure?
I love experimental work. I'm open, I just think the work has to be successful on its own terms. And then I do think, on a curatorial level, we do want to publish things that are in conversation with each other in ways that feel exciting and useful. So I would say I don't like to be categorical about what kind of work, but I definitely feel like hybridity is really interesting. I think experimental work is often really interesting, and we're open and would love to see high quality, dynamic gorgeousness, whatever form it takes.
Another question, Nicole, about poetry. What poem is giving you joy right now?
What Helen? What was that?
Poem. What poem is giving you joy right now?
I have to say right now I'm reading Anaïs Duplan's book, and this is just and I'm late to this party, by the way, but I love this book, and I've just been moving through this and just looking at I'm not sure that I can settle right now on a poem that's giving me joy, but I will say that the way these poems are flocking together and the way they keep rising up in my mind and the way that I refer back to them during the course of the day is a delight and a real gift. So this is Take This Stallion, which I would recommend.
As a writer and editor with a background in poetry, what is your idea of a great Kenyon Review fiction story?
Again, I love a story that is actually a journey where I arrive somewhere new and that's unexpected. I love authenticity of voice. And again, I want to get away from being sort of categorical, but I love those. I love the piece that does have me transformed, and also that keeps me under the spell the entire time I'm reading.
Do you see a conversation between the visual and the poetic, having artists working together?
I do. I mean, I think if you think about a poem as a language that's built to construct it, to hold an idea or convey an idea. I mean, I feel like we have the visual language that's doing that work in a different kind of way, a different kind of medium. I definitely think that these things are in conversation. I would love to explore the relationship between these two things more in the journal and online, in the book and in KRO. So I'm interested in that, and I'm definitely. I feel like I've worked a lot around ekphrasis and thinking about these things together. But I would love to have people paired and working towards the same set of ideas together. I think that's really interesting.
I really like this next question. Can you talk more about what role Kenyon students play at the Kenyon Review?
Oh my goodness, what role don't Kenyon students play? We have so many great, smart students who work with us right now as associates, who do a lot of reading of the slush of the submissions that come through, and rigorous kind of training how to read and what we're thinking about as we read and review each piece. Every single piece that comes through gets looked at by usually 3 people, maybe more. So there are people who work with us that way. There's people who work with us as interns and are involved in events and work with Elizabeth Dark, who's on screen right now. I think that there's so many components to the organization and so many kinds of work that we do. And I would say in every single aspect, students are involved and make a really invaluable contribution.
I have one more question. We live in extraordinary times. and grapple with wide range of changes rooted in racism, economic disparity, and cultural identification. How will the Kenyon Review address these issues?
We have so many commitments, and our commitments are to, first our writers and then our readers. And so I would say that one of the things that we really try to do is to nurture our writers and make sure that they have the tools that they need to do the good and necessary work that they do. So that is, there's educational aspects to the review, but there's also just the notion that we are going to, if we receive a piece, have the capacity to work individually with writers to advance that draft, to bring it to the potential that we see in it. That's a really important, it's an important opportunity, but it's an important kind of caretaking role that we do need to provide for our writers. And then secondly, being able to engage the conversations that are of the moment and that are necessary, and that in this moment it's really turbulent right now. So we definitely want to be able to provide issues that give people what they need, in terms of solace, in terms of hope, in terms of consolation, in terms of a way to express and respond to the collective grief that we're all experiencing. And there's so much work for the imagination to do, and there's so much need for that. So to keep on publishing volumes and keep on making sure that we're reaching out to all of the writers who are connected and eager to respond to this as best we can, and put that out there into the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole and Carl, for this lovely conversation. And thank you, audience, for such thoughtful questions. I would now like to introduce Gibson Oakley from Kenyon Class of 2016. Gibson is also a former Kenyon Review student associate and has created a special cocktail and mocktail for tonight's celebration. And he will now show us his talents as a mixologist, and you will see the ingredients in the chat as you follow along. In addition, you will receive in your inbox tomorrow an email which will include Gibson's full recipes for both of these drinks. Thanks, Gibson.
Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. I was a Kenyon Review associate for all 4 years of undergrad, and I have so many fond memories of my time with the magazine. When I was thinking on how to really craft these cocktails and mocktails, I was thinking of those favorite memories. And for whatever reason, one of those that stands out to me is the copy editing workshop that the Kenyon Review puts on for its associates. I had a chance to speak with the copy editors, hear about their process. And the detail that stays with me all these years later is that the Kenyon Review copy editors use a blue pen and a red pen for all of those necessary and sort of mandatory corrections, periods and commas and such, and a blue pen for some of those more stylistic editorial comments. And it was that red that really stuck with me. I used to love Shirley Temples as a kid, but nowadays I find them a little too sweet. So I decided to make a few adjustments to that Shirley Temple recipe to create a mocktail that I'm calling the Copy Editor. So to a cup full of ice, you'll add about 6 or so ounces of ginger beer. And then to get that red color, about a ½ ounce of grenadine. And then a little acid to cut through that sweetness with some lime juice, lemon juice, whatever you have on hand. You can stir that right up and garnish with a lime twist. And there you have a wonderful Copy Editor mocktail. Moving on to the hard stuff. Kenyon Review associates, as I'm sure many of you already know, are some of the frontline readers for this magazine. And so I'm calling this The Associate Always Reads Twice. Of course, a pun on The Postman Always Reads Twice, or Brings Twice. A book that I read my senior year at Kenyon with Sergei Labanov-Rostovsky of the Kenyon Review. 2 associates will read each submission, and based on their votes, it'll be determined as to whether that submission gets sent up for further review by an editor, or whether it's not the right fit for the magazine at this time. So going off of that idea of 2, I was thinking of cocktails that have 2 alcohol bases. And the French 75 is, of course, one of those with champagne and gin. But I love a good herbal cocktail. So I made a few modifications, mainly some rosemary simple syrup. Very easy to make. Equal parts rosemary, sugar, and water. A pot on the stove, bring it to a boil, and then take it off the heat, let it steep for half an hour, and you have your rosemary simple syrup. Of course, you can do that with regular simple syrup as well. This cocktail will still work. So a ½ ounce of that rosemary simple syrup, a ½ ounce of some freshly squeezed grapefruit juice, and then an ounce of Empress 1908 gin. You can use any gin, but the Empress 1908 has this beautiful purple color, which gives it a bit of a Kenyan theme. So add that all to a shaker full of ice, shake it on up, grab your champagne flute or whatever glass you have on hand. And then you'll be able to top that with some Prosecco, some champagne, some sparkling wine. Again, whatever you have on hand, desperate times. About 3 ounces or so of that, and then garnish with some grapefruit and a sprig of rosemary, and there you have it. The associate always reads twice. So whether you have a Kenyon Review signature drink in front of you, or you have an old favorite, I invite you to raise a glass to Nicole. Cheers. And with that, I offer a warm welcome to 2 Kenyon Review Fellows, poet Molly McCully Brown, and prose writer Misha, who will give us a sample of their talents.
Hi, it's so lovely to be here with all of you tonight and to welcome Nicole to the review. We're so lucky to have you. I have 3 poems to read for you tonight, all of which I've realized are unintentionally in part about the middle of the night, and so perhaps ushering us all off to our beds. This is called The Animals. Each time I open my mouth, a creature climbs out. Field cricket, coral snake, fruit bat, Arctic wolf, full grown and headed for the tundra with my 3rd rib in his mouth. They tear off into the distance, turning to water where the street lamp finally loses to the bruise of the dark. Every beast that goes leaves one less bone in my body, or takes with it my tongue, a ligament, the bloody balloon of my lung. In the stomachs of animals, I am homesick for the snow. In the stomachs of animals, I roam the globe, snap a turkey's neck, whistle to the bottom of a black lake, swallow smaller winged things right out of the sky. The last of me waits with you on the ground in the low light, while one by one the tamer things go home. Press your windswept shoulder to the shoulder I have left. I pull a crow's blue feather warm out of your hair. In a farther field, you watch your own animals clamber around. There, just before the tree line, a bundle of deer ferry pieces of ourselves toward us in their gulping eyes. There are an awful lot of ways to be in love with the world, and none of them are easy. This next poem was written about one of the earliest anatomical theaters in the West, so one of the places that we really begin to understand human anatomy and develop what would become contemporary surgery and contemporary medicine. Dear Maker, look at the marble table, the cleaver and the stars they built to watch the butchering, the human constellations cut into the ceiling there. Hosts of older gods and men of science lined shoulder to shoulder, sharp as buzzards on the walls. I'm half a world away from the country I was born in, and this is not a church. But Maker, look, here is what I believe in. All those years ago, they butterflied a body just to put their hands inside, learn ligament, lymph node, liver, and lung, how one piece dictates another, how a creature runs. One man bent over another and forgot himself, thought, look, what's done can be undone and redone better. Took a chisel and a saw and some string to the body, pared away error, practiced what would one day make me, how to see the body as a country you can section and redraw without a sacrifice. Look, here your face clouds over. Here a whole new kind of grief is born out under whittled stars. And this last poem is called Transubstantiation, which for those of you who don't know is the idea in Catholicism that when you take communion, the wine and the bread literally become the body and blood of Christ. Transubstantiation. It's the middle of the night. I'm just a little loose on beer and blues and battered air and all the ways this nowhere looks like home. The fields and boarded houses dead with summer, the filling station rowdy with the rumor of another place. Cattle pace the distance between road and gloaming, inexplicably awake. And then the bathtubs littered in the pasture, for sale or salvage or some secret labor stranger than I know. How does it work again, the alchemy that shapes them briefly into boats and then the bones of great felled beasts and once more into keening copper bells before I even blink? Half a mile out, the city builds back up along the margin, country songs cut in and out of static on the radio. Lord, most of what I love mistakes itself for nothing. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to introduce the wonderful Misha, the Kenyon Review's Prose Fellow.
Molly McCully Brown is always the best act to follow. And I have been tremendously, tremendously lucky to follow her so many times. Thank you, Malls, for that flawless reading. Thank you too to President Decatur, to everyone at the review, and to Nicole for letting me share in this wonderful and momentous event. And if I may, thank you again, Nicole, for encouraging me towards newer opportunities and for gently guiding me in the time I have left at the review. So it is only fitting that I read the beginning of a short story that was recently published in the November-December issue of the Kenyon Review. The last issue, edited by the great David Lynn, another kind mentor. So glad the story passed Master David. The story is called 20 Years Ago. Let me at the start say that Nishi Singh is a healthy woman. She was healthier still, body and mind, at the time of the alleged murder and haunting some 20 years ago. She had been married for almost 2 years then and had stopped working as sports mistress at an all-girls school the year before. Her Amazonian field hockey girls, midway through a double-leg calf raise, intoned her words, "A healthy body leaves no space for an idle mind." Such was her following. Yet it is true, there's really no point in denying it, since the facts will be made public, that at the time of the strange journey, she had been housebound for over 6 months. Her husband, Captain Brigunath Singh, was gravely ill, and she had been caring for him on her own in a gloomy house in a hill station in the Himalayas. Winter in a dry climate will do the trick, the family physician had advised. There were the usual visits from a local doctor and nurse who came and went, but the minute to minute fell on her. So yes, she had no real company and was often too tired to even walk the length of the house. The other thing to bring up here is the circumstances of the train Nishianti and Brigu Uncle, I'm related to both by blood, took to travel home. Newly manufactured on its maiden trip, the 24-bogie train was traveling with 2 motors attached. The spare was to be dropped off at a rail yard at a point in the journey, but that never happened, and none of the documentation explains why. At any rate, the train was propelled forward with twice the usual horsepower. At the time, this was the reason given for the relentless feelings of oppression Nishianti and some other passengers endured as their compartments were violently pulled in one direction and then the other each time the train slowed down and stalled. In those moments, once when another train had the right of way and a second time outside a station that was still clearing its tracks, Nishianti realized that the face peering at her was in fact disembodied. What you should be aware of at this point is that Nishianti is not the kind of person who expends her energy on cultivating an imagination. She is practical, she is matter of fact, she is composed. She is exactly the kind of person who devoutly believes both in a pantheon of gods and hell, but if the divine or supernatural were to lurk up to her, she would simply blink. In short, she refuses to think too much, and for the most part, this character trait has served her well. Now, of course, the length of Nishianti and Brigu Uncle's journey, those 40 hours, are being examined again. The train in question was recently set on fire. No passengers or rail crew were hurt. What is puzzling is that whoever burned the train waited a week before breaking into a guarded rail yard to steal the charred metallic remains, crushing them elsewhere before dunking them in the Ganges for purification. The video, once uploaded on the Exorcism channel on YouTube, got over 65 million hits within a day. In the last 10 seconds, a link appears at the bottom titled Secret Histories, Spectres of the Murdered on the Rajdhani Express, where names of the deceased, the year of their death, and their sightings, apparitions are catalogued. And the third one, red inked on that list, is that of Brighunath Uncle. At first, I believe all the officer in charge of the case intended to do was investigate the arson and the subsequent pollution of the Ganges. But before any action could be taken on the latter, one of the nation's notorious holy man turned politician called on his seething followers. How was it, he asked, that these train murders were committed in the two towns where Hindus are a minority? How was it that the majority of the murdered names on the list belonged to Hindus? Are we going to let those cow eaters get away with this? Are we going to let them ruin our culture, our history? Well, after that and brutal religious violence, the government ordered inquiries be opened on every death on that preposterous YouTube list. Even though any proof to support such allegations, if it had ever existed, had been lost a long time ago. And only a quarter of all the deaths had occurred between the towns the godmen mentioned, yes, where Hindus were fewer. Then Jansatta printed a half-page infographic on their front page. Reported crimes against Hindus were higher because they made up almost 80% of the nation's population. How even in natural death, recorded in government census reports, Hindus outperformed every other religion, but none of that mattered. The ranks of cow protection vigilante groups swelled. Reports of lynched and murdered Muslims and Christians began to appear daily in the news. And everyone connected to the alleged murders on the Rajdhani Express was a suspect. As you can imagine, the bereaved were furious. There were so many exaggerated and inaccurate stories circulating that Nishi Auntie and Brigu Uncle's families decided on a private investigation into Brigu Uncle's alleged murder to augment the efforts made by the police. Even Nishi Auntie's fiancé, oh yeah, she's getting married again to another cousin of her husband, another uncle of mine, after much protest, agreed that it was necessary to document the few facts actually known, regardless of whatever else was uncovered. It is true that for a little while after the family pulled him into a closed room for some chai and chat, Nishi Auntie's fiancé spent time polishing his spectacles rigorously before slipping them back on to follow his future bride's movements as she went about her day. Still, for the sake of the family name, he helped choose an investigator connected to those inexplicable events 20 years ago, though not someone who was actually there. You see, apart from my relation to both families, as a child, I too had been briefly ill, living in the same Eeyorish-looking house on top of a hill. I had also once been a journalist, and it was my father who held a makeshift bandage over Nishi Auntie's bleeding head when he found her in her rail compartment where he had gone to receive her and Brigu Uncle on her arrival home. That is my one part in this story. Other than that, I have written down as clearly as I can, in my own words, without leaving anything out, and in a straightforward manner, what happened all those years ago. Nishi Auntie, quite frankly, not always available to talk, is sometimes too distracted or momentarily confused and responds in short, fragmentary bursts that come across as nerves. Of the things she is sure, no one can convince her otherwise, and it's from her moments of certainty that I chronicle that mysterious affair. Thank you. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Tariq Thompson, who first came to Kenyon as a young writer, enrolled and became a Kenyon Review intern, and continues on his journey to becoming a stellar poet. Take it away, Tariq.
Thank you, Misha. Can everyone hear me okay? My Wi-Fi is a little weak sometimes. Is everything good on this end? I actually cannot tell if anyone responded to that, but I will assume that it is. But hey, everyone, I'd like to first off just thank the KR for hosting this event. I'm really grateful that we're all able to formally celebrate Nicole as our new editor, even while we're apart. I'm a little jealous of the new associates that they get to work with her for so long, but it was really important to me that we had this time. And also thank you to Misha and Molly for sharing their gorgeous work. Thank you to Carl Phillips for coming to have this conversation, and thank you to the KR for allowing me to share mine. Again, my name is Tariq Thompson, and I'm a KR associate, an intern, and the KR has just been immensely important in my literary journal. Wow. See, literary journey. But I have one poem to share with you all today, and that's my Adroit 2020 prize winning poem, titled "On Their Birthday, Suge Knight and My Daddy Discuss Forgiveness." For years, crime and cry seem like the same word. You can be and do crime. I suppose you can be a cry too, a warning. Wailing, I think, should be seen as a signal to the self. There's a whale in the ocean everyone calls lonely. Its cries, like a child, are heard by no one. It's talking to itself, ignoring the fact that it is a whale, ignoring the fact that it lurks. I see myself. It is real gangster to be alone. This way, you answer to no one. My baby boy came into this world screaming, and rocking him in my arms. I named him the morning sun. I caved and loved him. I left. One evening, puffing weed crumbles into my chest. I remembered the dawn, the light, greeting the clouds, greeting the moon. Yet, every night, leaving. Thank y'all for coming, and I'm passing it to President Decatur.
Thank you, Tariq, and thank you to all of our participants, so Carl and Nicole and Molly and Misha for the presentations tonight. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Please look for the next issue of the Kenyon Review, the January-February issue, or even better, if you are not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the Kenyon Review for a year or more. And I think there is a link in the chat which can direct you to how to do that. We also invite you to join us again on February 9th, where Ross Gay, Zaid Jones, and Shira Ehrlichman come together live via Zoom to share their work. And a link to register for that event will be coming out soon and available via email. So again, thank you all for joining us. This was a really terrific example of the power of words, and I hope that the power of words serves us well in 2021. Thank you again.